Under the burning Egyptian sun, soldiers drag a prisoner across the sand. The crowd watches in silence. They know punishment here was never meant to be merciful. The weight of order. Egyptian society revolved around Ma'at, the principle of truth, balance, and cosmic order. To disrupt this order was not simply a crime, it was a threat to the stability of the entire kingdom. Theft, adultery, corruption, and treason were all seen as direct assaults against the harmony that bound people to their gods and their pharaoh. Punishment, therefore, was not about rehabilitation, it was about restoring balance, sometimes through suffering so visible that the lesson was carved into the memory of all who watched. But how did this look in practice? To understand, we must descend into the darker corners of Egypt's legal system, where public displays of pain reminded every villager, every scribe, and every noble of the thin line between order and chaos. Pain as deterrent. One of the most common tools of discipline was the rod. Tomb paintings and ostraca, pottery shards used as writing surfaces, record the beatings of workers, slaves, and even scribes who failed in their duties. The village of Deir el-Medina, the settlement of craftsmen who built the Valley of the Kings, provides chilling evidence. Records detail punishments of up to 100 lashes for theft or insubordination. The blows, delivered with sticks of acacia or palm, could tear open skin and leave scars visible for life. But the punishment was not only physical, it was meant to humiliate. Stripped bare, tied, and struck in front of one's peers, the condemned carried shame that lingered long after the wounds had healed. And yet, these were only the beginning, the mildest of penalties in a system that had far crueler methods at its disposal. Branding and mutilation. For crimes considered especially disruptive to Ma'at, mutilation was employed. Ancient papyri and reliefs describe thieves having their noses cut off or their ears severed. Branding was another tool, searing iron pressed against the skin to mark a body permanently with disgrace. Some traditions even suggest that tongues might be removed, though direct Egyptian records are scarce. Whether fact or fearful rumor, the idea itself carried weight. Silence imposed on a wrongdoer in this life threatened silence in the next. These punishments served a dual purpose. They crippled the offender, reducing the likelihood of further misdeeds, and they made the crime visible to the community. A man without a nose, a servant with a scarred cheek, both became walking warnings. Egyptian law thus weaponized the human body itself as a permanent billboard of dishonor. But mutilation also had a spiritual edge. To deface a body was to threaten the soul's ability to function in the afterlife. To lose one's nose or tongue in this life was to risk silence and mutilation in eternity. Death in the Nile. The Nile River was Egypt's lifeblood, but it was also described in some accounts as a tool of punishment. Greek chroniclers claimed that criminals were bound and thrown into the waters, left to the mercy of crocodiles or the weight of the current. Whether this was a widespread Egyptian practice is uncertain, but the symbolism was powerful. This form of execution stripped the condemned of a proper burial, denying them the rights essential for entry into the afterlife. Unlike burial in the sands, which could preserve a body, drowning left little trace. To Egyptians, this was among the worst fates imaginable. For them, death was not an end, but a transition, and to be denied a preserved body meant eternal wandering. Here the punishment fused fear of physical death with the terror of spiritual annihilation. And still, this was not the most terrifying sentence that awaited Egypt's criminals. The breaking of officials. Corruption was a constant threat in the vast bureaucracy of Egypt. From tax collectors to temple priests, officials controlled flows of wealth and grain that could tempt even the most loyal servant of Pharaoh. When exposed, their fall was spectacular. Records from the New Kingdom describe corrupt scribes being beaten with rods, paraded through villages, and stripped of their titles. In some cases, their families were implicated. The punishment extended not just to the guilty but to their households. It emphasized that betrayal of Pharaoh poisoned an entire bloodline. In a culture where one's family name carried immense weight, This was both a public and generational execution of reputation. And yet, the Egyptians reserved their most dreadful punishments not for theft or corruption, but for one crime above all: treason. Treason against the pharaoh. Pharaoh was more than a king. He was the divine link between gods and men. To plot against him was to strike at the divine order itself. Punishments for treason were brutal and exemplary. The judicial papyrus of Turin, a surviving record from the reign of Ramesses III, details a conspiracy against the pharaoh orchestrated by members of his harem. When discovered, the accused faced execution methods designed not only to kill, but to erase. Some were forced to commit suicide, their bodies denied mummification. Others were burned, an unthinkable punishment in Egypt, where fire destroyed the body and annihilated any hope of resurrection. Burning was not simply execution, it was cosmic erasure. The papyrus lists dozens of names, each struck through in red ink. Even on papyrus, erasure was part of the sentence. We have seen lashings, mutilations, drownings, and even fire, but none of these yet reveal the most horrifying punishment the Egyptians devised. To uncover that, we must look at what they feared most: not just death, but eternal obliteration. The tomb as a prison. In a land where the afterlife was everything, the Egyptians knew how to weaponize burial itself. Some archaeological remains show hasty, unprepared burials, skeletons twisted in unnatural positions, bodies left without amulets or offerings. Ancient commentators later spoke of criminals being entombed alive, sealed away without air, food, or light. Whether this occurred often is debated, but the meaning was clear. Such treatment condemned a soul to wander without protection in the underworld. This was not simply physical execution, it was a denial of eternity. To the Egyptian mind, such a fate was worse than 100 blows of the rod. The quarry of silence. Egypt's economy depended on stone. The quarries of Aswan and Tura supplied blocks for temples and pyramids, but they also served as places of punishment. Criminals sentenced to hard labor were sent to cut stone under a burning sun, shackled in gangs, beaten by overseers. Greek visitors, like Diodorus Siculus, later recorded that quarry sentences were effectively slow death. Men collapsed from heatstroke, starvation, or were crushed under rockfalls. Those who survived carried ruined bodies and crippled hands, marked forever as tools broken in Pharaoh's service. The silence of the quarry, stone echoes, hammer blows, cries swallowed by heat, was itself part of the punishment. Here, the condemned were buried not under sand, but under endless toil. Poison, forced suicide, and ritual death. Elite conspirators often faced death not by sword, but by poison. The judicial papyrus of Turin shows that members of Pharaoh's inner circle were commanded to take their own lives. The act of suicide was framed as both punishment and duty. To refuse was to face an even more humiliating death at the hands of executioners. Such poisonings carried ritual significance. The condemned drank not merely to end their life, but to accept their removal from the order of Egypt. Unlike burning, which erased the soul, poisoning preserved a twisted form of dignity, yet the humiliation was complete. The act left no heroic death, no warrior's end, only silence and disgrace. Public spectacle and the crowd. Punishment in Egypt was never private. Reliefs show bound figures beaten while others look on. Written accounts describe criminals executed in marketplaces, their bodies left displayed as a deterrent. In some cases, corpses were nailed to city gates, denied burial, exposed to the desert sun, torn apart by scavenging birds. This spectacle was carefully orchestrated. It was not only about pain, but about memory. To see a body rotting on the gates of Memphis or Thebes was to carry an indelible reminder of Pharaoh's power and the price of disobedience. And in the shadows of these punishments lay the most feared fate of all, one so destructive that Egyptians did not even like to speak of it. Erasure of the name. For Egyptians, the soul was made of multiple parts: the Ka, the Ba, the Ak. Yet all relied on one fragile thing: remembrance. To have one's name spoken was to live on. To have it erased was to die twice. Thus, the most horrible punishment of all was damnatio memoriae, the deliberate erasure of a person's identity. The names of traitors were hacked out of monuments, faces were chiseled away. In temple records, papyri, and tombs, their memory was struck in red ink, cursed and obliterated. Without a name, a soul could not be summoned in rituals. It could not be sustained by offerings. It could not exist in eternity. It was not just execution, it was annihilation.